The next thing that we're going to learn about here is how to respond to events in Android inside of our activity. This is going to be very important because we're going to be able to not only want to update controls and things in our view to the user, but we need to be able to respond to things happening in the view. Perhaps the most common thing that we're going to respond to is a button click. So I'm going to show you here now how we can put a button on the page and then respond to the click. So first, let's go ahead and create a text view, an edit text that someone can actually put some text in. And then we're going to grab that text when they click the button. So here and this is going to be similar to, we're going to use this in our application where we had set up the protein consumed field for them to enter the amount of grams of protein consumed, and then the button to actually enter it. But for now, we're just going to test this by having a simple editable edit text here, and then we're going to have a button here that can be clicked, and then we're going to grab the value of this, and we're actually just going to put it out to the debug console in Android so that we can make sure that we've gotten that value. So the first thing that we need to do is make sure that both of these controls have an ID. So I'm going to just leave this as edit text 1 for the ID here, and for the button 1. It'll be easy for us to remember. And then we can look in our r.java file just to verify that we have these now. In our main activity, we're going to go in here and we're going to grab the button. So I'll create a new button, and we have to cast it as a button. And I'm going to hit Control-Shift-O to auto-import button. And then we're going to go and type find view by ID. And we're going to do r.id.button1. So this will give us a reference to our button. And then what we have to do in Android is, it's not like .NET or C# where we have events and event handlers or delegates. What we have to do is essentially use an observer pattern in order to respond to what would be an event. So if we do button.set onClickListener, we can create a listener for this onClick that will respond to that button being clicked. What's essentially going to happen here is that when button has a click happen, it is going to look and see what class that implements this onClickListener interface, if any, is set on the button. And on that class, it's going to call a specific method in order to perform the action. So let's look at how this works. I'm going to create a new onClickListener, and Eclipse is automatically going to fill this in for me. And I'm using Control-Shift-O here again to auto-import, very important hotkey. But what you can see happening here is that onClickListener is actually an interface. So this is kind of strange. How am I newing an interface? Well, in Java, you can do what is called an anonymous method overriding. It's kind of like an anonymous object if you're from a C# background, but what I'm doing is I'm anonymously creating this object and at the same time overriding a method on it. And so in this case, I'm anonymously creating an object that implements this onClickListener interface, and I have to implement an onClick method in order for this interface's contract to be fulfilled. So I'm providing it right here in line in this anonymous object. And so the syntax is a little bit confusing, but you can see here this whole block here is actually the declaration of the new object that implements onClickListener, and then the method that I'm overriding here, the onClick. So what will happen now, if you can imagine that if the button gets a click happening on it, it's going to look and see, is there an onClickListener that has been set for me? If so, it knows that in order for an onClickListener to be set, that onClickListener has to implement the interface onClickListener. An onClickListener has to have an onClick method. So button will then actually call the onClick method. And so now we can provide something for button to do here. So let's do this. When button gets clicked, let's go ahead and grab the value out of that edit text that we had declared, and let's go ahead and put that out to the console or to the Android debug log. So in order to grab that edit view, we'll need to do edit text, and then I'll just call this edit text. Import this in, and then we're going to do find view by ID, and then again we're going to do r.id.edit text one. Now we have that, and if we wanted to get the, we have to cast this, of course, to edit text, and we can do edit text dot get text, and that will get us the text out of there. And then what we should be able to do is do log.d, which will send to the debug log, and then we're going to pass the tag and then the message. In this case, the tag is going to refer to our application or some unique identifier. In this case, let's call this, make the tag protein tracker, so we can identify where this message has come from. And then the message, which will be the actual text to a string of this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run this and make sure it worked. So I'm going to go to run, and then let's pull up our emulator. Okay, and we have test updating a view. I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3 here, and then I'm going to click the button. And then let's look, remember in a previous module we talked about this DDMS console? Now we're actually going to use this. This log D should be printing out the text that was in there. So if we go to DDMS, and then I've actually pulled up, I had logcat here, but if you're first coming into the screen, you're going to have logcat in the bottom here. I'm double clicking logcat to maximize it, and I'm looking here for protein tracker. And you can see that we have a tag protein tracker message that has the message 123. So that worked. So we have successfully created our button and we've responded to the event. So if you want to respond to events in Android in your activity, you have to remember first you grab the view object that you want to respond to an event for, and then you set a listener for the particular event. Now there's another thing that we could do here to make this a little bit simpler, where we don't have to have this inline implementation of this method here inside this interface. What we can do is instead we could do button.set on click listener, and then we can just use a variable name here. Let's call this button listener, and then we can actually utilize Eclipse to auto create this for us. We can say create a local variable button listener. Or actually, in this case, let's create a field on our class. So we can do create field button listener. And now you can see that there is a on click listener button listener, and we can actually set it right where we declare it. So we can set this equal to, and then we can do this whole new right here. I'll just pull this out and put it here. And now what we've done is we've simplified this so that we don't have all of this mess here in our onCreate. Instead, we have a private variable called button listener, and this implements the on-click listener, and we provide the implementation right in line here, and then we can put our logic right in there. And so that's it. It's actually pretty simple to respond to events in Android.